from the very beginning. There's only one race, and it's human.
Yes.
It's Homo sapien. However, realistically, and looking at boots on the ground, we know that race exists perceptually. And so we have to deal with what was set in place a very long period or time ago, and we're still suffering from this false pseudoscience.
Well, and to underline that just one more time, is that we now have offices at the state that deal with disproportionality, particularly, specifically of black children in foster care. I mean, it's, the studies have been done. There is this child and this child. If this child is black, they will go into foster care. If this child is not black, they will return to his parents. And so they see this and they see it in healthcare. I mean, the disproportionality is like everywhere. So again, I think if we're not post-race, we're not, we're probably at the post, starting a different race, which is to erase the necessity of even having race.
You know, I'm not post-racial, I'm anti-racial. And I think that's the terms we ought to be looking at. It doesn't go away because it's infected people at a broad scale. Across the board, our educational system is still teaching Eurocentric, with Eurocentric point of view, and these labels are still there.
Thank you. Back to the topic of post-racial. I really don't understand what kind of definition. I don't know a definition of post-racial. I've been doing multicultural leadership training for several years now, and we use the term modern, not postmodern, but modern racism, which is unaware racism, which is institutional racism, which is white privilege denial. And this I can understand because there are examples and specific examples that fit, like a child that is in preschool that is a Hispanic and is given certain tests like how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to see thought processes. Well, if a child is coming from a family where peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are unknown, it's a very white kind of sandwich. And now they even have special gourmet shops of peanut butter and jelly, and there's one in Chicago. And I'm like, oh my God. But that child then is put into a class for a child with learning disabilities. And a teacher that will give someone that is black or Hispanic a really hard time trying to get them to bring up, or a teacher that will feel really sorry and guilty because they're white and have had privilege and will let a child get by with things. But there are specific terms and stories and situations in using the term modern racism because it does not deny any of that. It's saying, oh, okay, well, it's not the old-fashioned racism, but what we deal with now is a modern racism. I found that very helpful, and people like Valerie Batts does an excellent job of really delving into that and giving specific categories. And I find that very helpful because post-racial just doesn't mean anything to me. It's like, well, what is it?
Well, I think I should have probably given the history, but I think the official definition, according to Wikipedia, is a society where race doesn't matter.
It's meaningless.
Which I think, Obama sort of made the term popular with mass media. Not that he used the term post-racial, but he did make the comment after he won the Iowa caucus that we are on the path to moving beyond race. And so the mass media sort of ate that up and said, like when he won the election, I didn't even realize that he was a black man speaking.
Lauren, he got a rude awakening when they questioned his birth certificate.
And I think what's interesting is that I think although his campaign used this idea of post-racial to get him elected, I'm not going to put it out there. I'm hoping that he gets reelected for just one principle, but I think it will become an issue with this election. I think actually people will use that as a reason to justify not re-electing him. So we are post-racial, so therefore we're not looking at the fact that you're a historic black president. We're looking at the fact that we don't like what you're doing as a politician. So as a post-racial society, we must not elect you, you know? So I think, you know, there's,
We have to get rid of that term.
My comment on that is that right now with this deficit problem, this debt crisis, more than anything, I see it as a racial card being played. The Republicans have found that we've got this black man. I don't care if he's part black. The one drop rule applies here as far as they're concerned. As far as the Republicans, as far as the Tea Party is concerned, he is black. Nothing else said. They don't want in there. They're going to do whatever needs to be done to make him look bad. If the country has to go to hell in a handbasket, so be it. And we don't, as a people, are not getting angry and not doing enough about this to make this visible. We did enough to make it visible to get the man elected. But right now, we're kind of like sitting on our laurels and saying, oh well. And I would really like to see him be reelected, but if we continue at the pace we're going now, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Okay.
I was thinking about this topic on the way over here, and I was saying that actually the way I see it is that it's sort of, I don't know, it's human nature, if you will, but it's certainly an attribute of us to think of people as us and them, to create a dichotomy. And in the past, I think race was a more obvious one. It's got people have learned it. That's kind of not nice, so we won't do that quite so obviously. But these days, it seems to me, and especially as anxiety grows over the economy, over the wars and the possibility of terrorists, the people are using other areas in which to express that dichotomy of us and them. I think we've heard some examples tonight of the difference between Republicans and Democrats, the difference between liberals and conservatives. I've heard some of the nastiest things said about people from a different political philosophy or persuasion. You can actually hear it, you know, broadcast on the airwaves. Just turn on your AM radio. And, you know, I think if you ask your students, they probably have heard far more jokes about conservatives or liberals, depending on which side they are, or sexism, women or men, than you do these days about race. I'm not saying it's not a factor, I'm not saying it's not there. I'm saying I think it's always going to be there to some extent. And when we're in a period where people are thinking of fear, they're going to be more likely to make that kind of dichotomy between us and them, and protecting us, you know, from them.
I'll take that one question. I want to get back to the idea of identity, but we'll take this comment first.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about identity more. I'd like to add on to something that Dr. Smith was kind of touching on too. And as a queer person of color, I think that what's scary and dangerous to me about the idea of things being labeled post-racial is that also kind of you can't to change the future, you can't hurt the past. And when to say that we are in this post-racial society, and it kind of also negates, if you say we're post-feminist or we're post-queer, and we're post-racial, and those labels that we, as people, put value, whether or not we embrace the label we're given by society or it's a label that we create for ourselves, it kind of adds to this cultural malaise. And the base that we were talking about earlier too, the need for radical activism these things, you know, if all of these things don't exist, you know, like, what are the kids that are in junior high and high school now, you know, their sense of history and their sense of themselves is being lost because they have no idea about the past.
Well, I think, you know, and to bring it back to the idea of post-identity and everything, I think what you're saying is how I felt when the idea of post-black became the new buzzword in the visual arts circle. And for those of you who don't know, the idea of post-black, it was actually Thelma Golden from the Studio Museum of Art in Harlem. She wasn't the first to use it, but she was the one to sort of make it popular. And I understood, and I actually have the catalog, the exhibition that she coined the term with was called Freestyle. And it was I guess the first major exhibition in the museum's history to show like have a big show of contemporary black artists and sort of start this tradition every 3 years or so, you know, showing what's new in, you know, the contemporary black art scene. And so, you know, she sort of made this like ironic and humorous, she posed this idea, which is her experience of doing studio visits and talking to artists and how they didn't want to be identified as black artists because they didn't want to be put into that box. Yet their work was very much steeped in the idea of blackness and black issues and the complex notion of identity. And so, you know, people sort of ran with that term. And so all of a sudden, you know, I actually had friends that identified as post-black. And I felt a little bit, you know, strange about that because I'm like, I feel really black, so does that mean I'm like not postmodern enough? And, you know, even in my crits and when I was in grad school, I had professors tell me like, your work is not postmodern enough and you need to get post-black. So I want to throw it back to about the idea of identity, post-black, I never actually heard of post-identity. So if you could talk a little